Picture this. It's the 1940s in the Deep South. A black grandmother walks home from the only corner store that will serve her. The butcher tosses her a paper-wrapped bundle from the bag. Whatever's left after the good cuts are sold. By the time she gets it into her kitchen, the smell is already telling her the truth. This meat is not fresh. She doesn't have a car to drive across town. She doesn't have a fridge that can keep food cold for days. She does have 6 mouths to feed and no room for sickness. So she does what black women have always done in impossible conditions. She turns the kitchen into a survival lab. She unwraps the package, inspects every inch, trims away anything gray or slimy, douses it in vinegar or lemon, rinses, scrubs, and seasons until the odor is tamed. The sink is splattered, the counter is wiped with bleach water. And the stove does the final work, a long, hard cook that leaves nothing pink. Fast forward generations, and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren are still soaking chicken in salt, lemon, or vinegar before it hits the pan. Meanwhile, food safety experts are on TV insisting raw meat should never be washed. White families, who've spent decades trusting inspected, refrigerated meat, repeat the mantra, "The heat will kill the bacteria." So how did we get here? Where black folks are rinsing meat like it's second nature, and white folks look at that habit like it's dirty, backwards, or unnecessary. Scope News is doing a deep dive into the real history behind this controversial habit, and it doesn't start online. It starts with who got safe food and who never did. Long before there was a CDC, USDA, or any federal oversight, enslaved Africans were routinely given the worst cuts of meat available. Slaveholders kept prime cuts for themselves and distributed scraps, offal, intestines, feet, neck bones, and heads to enslaved families. These pieces spoiled faster, smelled stronger, and often arrived already contaminated. Food historians have documented how enslaved black cooks developed methods of soaking, rinsing, scraping, boiling, and over-seasoning meat not for flavor alone, but for survival. Chitterlings, oxtails, neck bones, and pig feet were not heritage dishes at first. They were what people were forced to eat, and cleaning them thoroughly was non-negotiable. That knowledge didn't disappear with emancipation, it evolved. After slavery, many black women worked as domestic cooks and maids in white households. A widespread practice known as pan-toting emerged, where leftover food was taken home as informal compensation. These leftovers often sat out for hours, were reheated, or passed down untouched. Once those pans crossed back into black homes, the ritual returned. Inspect, wash, boil, sanitize. Children watching in those kitchens learned an unspoken rule early. Never assume food is safe just because someone else handled it first. By the Jim Crow era, segregation guaranteed that black customers were often served last and served worst. This extended into grocery stores, butcher shops, and relief programs. During the Great Depression, oral histories describe black families waiting days in segregated relief lines only to receive spoiled meat when they reached the front. These accounts are not folklore. They are recorded testimonies describing meat that smelled rotten before it ever reached a stove. In the 1960s, anger over exploitative food practices boiled over in black neighborhoods nationwide. In Los Angeles, reports tied to the Watts Uprising documented residents complaining about neighborhood markets charging inflated prices for spoiled meat and rotten produce. Stores people were forced to rely on because they had no alternatives. Some residents later recalled specific markets infamous for selling bad meat to customers who lacked transportation or money to shop elsewhere. This pattern was not isolated. Mid-century newspapers regularly warned about grocery stores targeting low-income black communities with bargain meat that was near expiration or already spoiled. Complaints about inferior food in segregated housing projects were common and largely ignored. So when black elders say, "They used to give us bad meat," that statement is backed by documented history. Even after Jim Crow signs came down, the conditions didn't vanish. Redlining and segregation shaped what scholars now call food apartheid, neighborhoods where full-service grocery stores are scarce, refrigeration infrastructure is weaker, and residents are more likely to encounter expired or low-quality food. Public health studies consistently show that predominantly black neighborhoods have fewer supermarkets, lower quality produce, and higher exposure to outdated goods than white or affluent areas. Residents and journalists alike have documented expired meat, spoiled dairy, and discount cuts that should never have been sold. Against that backdrop, washing meat becomes less about tradition and more about learned vigilance. Ask any black person raised by a grandmother or auntie and they'll tell you, the meat ritual is serious. The package gets opened, sniffed, inspected, rinsed, sometimes soaked, then rinsed again. The sink gets scrubbed afterward, the counter gets bleached, the stove does the rest. Modern food science says washing raw meat doesn't remove bacteria and can spread contamination around the kitchen. That's true. Cooking meat to the proper temperature is what kills pathogens. But here's the disconnect. Public health guidance assumes a level of trust in the food system that black communities historically did not have, and often still don't. Surveys consistently show that black households are more likely than white households to wash raw poultry. That's not accidental. It reflects lived experience. White households, particularly after the mid-20th century, benefited earlier and more fully from meat inspection laws, refrigeration, and supermarket expansion. As food regulation improved, trust in packaged meat became normalized in those spaces. Washing meat came to be seen as unnecessary, or even risky. But trust grows where protection exists. Black families didn't experience that same protection. Their relationship with food was shaped by slavery's scraps, Jim Crow's neglect, predatory merchants, and red-line neighborhoods. Washing meat became part of a broader kitchen survival school, a system of caution passed down quietly, generation to generation. So is washing meat wrong? From a microbiology standpoint, yes. Washing raw meat doesn't make it safer and can increase cross-contamination if done improperly. From a historical standpoint, the habit makes perfect sense. You cannot strip a survival behavior from its context and mock it without erasing the conditions that created it. You cannot tell a community that endured spoiled relief meat, discriminatory markets, and food apartheid to just trust the system without acknowledging what that system did and didn't do for them. When Scope News asks why black folks wash meat and white folks often don't, the answer isn't ignorance or superstition. It's history. One group learned to trust labels, inspections, and institutions. The other learned to trust their nose, their hands, and their grandmother. That difference still shows up at the kitchen sink today. Scope News tells the truth. Here are the facts. This report draws on documented historical records, oral histories from the Great Depression, civil rights era reporting tied to the Watts Uprising, scholarly research on food apartheid and redlining, and widely acknowledged public health guidance on meat safety. The patterns described, spoiled meat in segregated relief lines, exploitative neighborhood markets, and unequal food access, are supported by archival testimony, newspaper reporting, and academic analysis. Cultural practices around meat washing are corroborated by demographic surveys, showing racial differences in food handling habits, and by documented histories of black domestic labor and food survival strategies. Legal disclaimer. This Scope News report is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute medical, nutritional, or legal advice. While every effort has been made to reflect historical events accurately using documented cases and scholarly research, no single report can capture all perspectives or experiences. Viewers should consult qualified professionals for guidance on food safety or health practices. Discussions of slavery, segregation, and systemic neglect may be distressing for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Scope News aims to present historical truth within the limits of available records and licensing.